Have you ever sat alone in a quiet room, letting your thoughts drift and whispering to God, "Why am I lonely at this moment?" There are seasons in life when we watch others gradually drift away from us, even though we have tried to live kindly, patiently, and lovingly. Loneliness, then, is not merely the feeling of lacking people. It feels more like an invisible punishment, a silent rejection that weighs heavily on the heart. We easily believe that God is taking relationships away, separating us from the familiar world we once knew. But perhaps the truth is different. Sometimes God is not taking anything away at all. He is simply creating space. That space is not meant to cause us pain, but to give the heart room to settle, to let the noise of life soften. When everything around us grows quiet, we can hear more clearly the whisper of love, of faith, and of God Himself deep within our souls. Loneliness is not always a sign of loss. Sometimes it is a gentle yet necessary preparation. God quietly clears the space around us so that our hearts may open wider, so that we learn to live not dependent on the presence of others, but rooted more deeply in faith. Those silent seasons, if we dare to remain and listen, can completely change how we understand our own loneliness. In a small village in the peaceful countryside, where narrow dirt roads wound between simple houses and wide fields that swayed constantly in the wind, there lived an elderly woman named Eleanor. She was not remarkable, not wealthy, and there was nothing about her that drew attention at first glance. She walked slowly and spoke softly, yet in her eyes and every gesture there radiated a steady warmth, like a small flame burning quietly and never going out. Eleanor's house was very small, with old wooden walls and a simple roof. Yet anyone who stepped inside felt a strange sense of peace, not because the house was beautiful, but because it was filled with kindness. Eleanor believed that God did not dwell only in churches or in prayers, but was present wherever there was love and compassion. And so she tried to make her home a place where kindness never ran dry. Each day passed simply and quietly for Eleanor. She did not do great things, only lived slowly, attentively, and sincerely toward those around her. She greeted her neighbors with a gentle smile, listened with rare patience, and was always ready to open her door to anyone in need of a place to rest. For Eleanor, living well was not a choice, but the only way to live true to her faith. It was precisely this quiet way of living that made the little house a special place. It was not merely a shelter, but a refuge of peace. Eleanor did not try to prove anything to the world. She simply lived by her belief that when people love one another, God is very near. There was once a time when Eleanor's life was filled with sound and the warmth of family. The small house in the village was not just a dwelling, but the center of constant movement. Footsteps on the earthen floor, the sound of tools each morning, and gentle laughter spreading through every room. Back then, Eleanor never imagined that such fullness could come from things so simple. Her husband was a strong and optimistic man. He worked tirelessly on the family's land, yet always kept a gentle smile and a cheerful spirit. To Eleanor, he was not only a husband, but a steady anchor, giving her a sense of safety and peace. His presence made every hardship feel lighter. Their son Thomas was still young then, full of energy and curiosity. He constantly asked questions about the world, why plants grow, why people must work, and why God was always mentioned in their prayers each night. Those innocent questions kept the house from ever being quiet, but also from ever feeling empty. The three of them worked together, shared simple meals around the old wooden table, and ended each long day with humble prayers before sleep. They did not seek wealth or fame. All they wanted was to live in peace and be together. Eleanor often whispered her thanks to God for the life she had. She did not have much money or many comforts, but her heart never felt lacking. To her, happiness was not found in abundance, but in the love present each day. In that quiet fullness, she learned to cherish every small moment God gave her. That winter arrived gently, but brought with it a great turning point in Eleanor's life. Her husband's illness did not strike suddenly. It advanced day by day, quietly draining his strength. The man who had once been strong and joyful began to weaken, his steps slowing, his breathing growing heavier each afternoon. Eleanor witnessed it all in silence, her heart tightening as she struggled to remain calm. Long nights passed under the dim light of an oil lamp. Eleanor sat by the bed, holding her husband's thin hand, feeding him small spoonfuls, wiping sweat from his brow, and whispering familiar prayers she had known since childhood. At times she begged God to heal him, to grant their family more time, but on other nights her prayer was simply that God would stay, that they would not have to face this pain alone. Then one early morning, before dawn had fully spread its light, Eleanor's husband breathed his last. The house suddenly felt too large and too quiet. The silence pressed heavily on her heart, as if all familiar sounds had been taken away. Eleanor buried her face in her trembling hands, crying alone, and asking God why love could hurt so deeply. Yet in the midst of that seemingly unbearable loss, something strange occurred. Alongside the grief, Eleanor sensed a quiet invitation. It was as if God were reminding her that his presence had not vanished with her husband's passing. The house might be silent, but it was not empty. In her deepest pain, Eleanor began to understand that there was still a presence that remained, gently holding up her broken heart. After her husband died, Eleanor's pace of life slowed noticeably. Her body was no longer as agile as before. Hands once accustomed to labor began to tremble. Her back bent after years of work on the small plot of land. Every movement required more effort, yet Eleanor did not complain. She understood that time leaves its marks on the body, and she accepted this with quiet humility. Though her strength waned, Eleanor kept her daily habit of prayer. She believed that God did not give strength for the whole road ahead, but only enough for each day being lived. That faith kept her from fearing the future and helped her walk steadily in the present. Each morning she rose, lit the lamp, washed her face, and offered God a simple prayer of thanks for being given another day. When Thomas grew up, he left the village to work in the city. Before leaving, he promised to visit his mother often. At first, he kept his word. Each visit brought noisy stories, small gifts, and laughter that brightened the house again. Those moments helped Eleanor forget the emptiness for a while, and she always prayed for God to protect her son far away. But over time, the visits grew fewer. Each return was shorter than the last, until eventually there were only rare messages. Months passed when the door never opened to welcome Thomas home. Eleanor learned to eat dinner alone, listen to the wind outside the window, and accept the silence as part of her new life. Some nights, loneliness pressed heavily on her chest, and she softly asked God, "Is this what remains for me?" Yet each morning, Eleanor still rose, prayed, and continued living. Not because she did not feel sorrow, but because she believed God was still very near, even in the quietest days. Eleanor did not allow loneliness to make her withdraw. Instead, she chose to open her heart even more, though her life had become quiet. She did not ask God to take away the emptiness, only to let her remain useful. To Eleanor, being able to give love meant having a reason to rise each morning. Her days passed in simple rhythms. Eleanor cooked modest meals, kept the small house tidy, and tended the garden behind it, where she felt closest to God. When her hands touched the soil, she was reminded that life always begins in quiet ways. Among the trees and the wind, Eleanor prayed not with words, but with her calm presence. Children in the village often stopped at her gate. They did not come for delicious food or gifts, but for the sense of safety Eleanor gave them. She invited them in, shared bread and fruit, and told gentle stories. She listened to their small worries with rare patience, believing that God listens to every heart in the same way, whether great or small. Some wondered why Eleanor gave so much while living alone. She simply smiled kindly and said, "Loneliness is not empty when God is present." To her, God's presence filled the silences that people could not. Not only people, but all creatures seemed to sense the warmth around Eleanor. Birds often perched on her roof, as if seeking a peaceful resting place. A thin old dog lay waiting by her door each day. Eleanor gently stroked it and said that God always sends love to those who need it. In those seemingly quiet days, Eleanor was sowing seeds in silence. She did not know when they would sprout, but she trusted that no act of love given in faith is ever meaningless. One summer, Thomas returned from the city. He looked more tired than before, his eyes carrying the unease of a hurried and pressured life. Entering the old house, he saw his mother as busy as ever, cooking, sharing food, and using what little strength she had left to care for others. The sight filled him with both tenderness and confusion. He did not understand why his mother still worked so much, despite her age and solitude. A vague fear arose in him that one day, when she grew weaker, people would forget her, and no one would remain by her side. With concern mixed with anxiety, Thomas told his mother she should rest, that she had given enough, and that loneliness would be all that remained if she continued living this way. Eleanor looked at her son with gentle eyes. She did not scold him or offer a long explanation. In a soft voice, she said only that God had never forgotten her. And as long as she could still give love, she knew she was never truly alone. It was not consolation, but a deep faith forged through many silent years. Thomas was left speechless. To him, loneliness had always meant failure. He believed a full life was measured by noise, by the number of people around, by constant laughter. He had never learned to see the value of quiet service or silent days. That same evening, a poor traveler knocked at the door asking for food. Eleanor welcomed him without hesitation, with her familiar sincerity. Before leaving, the man blessed her, praying that God would repay her kindness when her strength was gone. Thomas heard those words, but their meaning had not yet reached his heart. That seemingly small encounter planted a quiet seed. Though Thomas did not realize it, in that moment his worldview began to shift, preparing him for a deeper understanding of love and loneliness. As time passed, Eleanor's health gradually declined. Her steps shortened, her breathing grew heavier in the evenings, and long nights became harder to endure. Some evenings, loneliness returned with force, bringing tears she could not hold back. But instead of letting sorrow close her heart, Eleanor chose to pray more deeply. She believed that in the darkest spaces, God was quietly shaping her heart in ways she could not yet see. Then a harsh winter came. Eleanor fell seriously ill, unable to stand or cook for herself. The small house, already accustomed to silence, now felt even more fragile. News of her condition spread quickly through the village, and what happened next went far beyond anything Eleanor had imagined. From many directions, people began to come. Women brought bowls of hot soup and medicine. Children sat by her bed, fanning her gently and holding her wrinkled hands. Men stood quietly on the porch, praying in silence. The little house suddenly filled with life, not with noise, but with sincere presence. Lying in her sickbed, Eleanor looked around and understood. Not a single act of love she had given was wasted. All of it had been kept, returned at the right time. God had forgotten nothing. Love once sown always finds its way back. When Thomas rushed home and saw the scene, his heart broke open. Sitting by his mother's bed, he wept and exclaimed that she had never been alone. Eleanor smiled weakly and whispered that God never takes love away. He only passes it into other hands. In that moment, Thomas finally began to understand what his mother had lived her entire life. After her health slowly recovered, Thomas could not hide his fear of losing his mother again. He earnestly asked her to leave the familiar village and move to the city to live with him. For him, keeping her close was not only duty, but a way to make up for the years he had been absent. Eleanor did not answer immediately. She spent many days in quiet prayer, listening to her heart and seeking peace from God. In those silent hours, Eleanor felt a deep consolation. She believed God was opening a new door, not to take away what was familiar, but to lead her into another form of service. With that faith, Eleanor agreed to go with her son to the city, carrying a heart ready for the unknown. Life in the city was completely different from the peaceful countryside. The noise, the crowds, and the tall walls sometimes made Eleanor feel lost, even while living in a small apartment with her son. At times, she tasted the familiar feeling of loneliness again, not from lack of people, but from lacking a place to give love. One day, Thomas took his mother to visit an orphanage. When he mentioned that she could help there, Eleanor's heart stirred. Tears quietly filled her eyes, not from sadness, but from realizing that her old prayer had been answered. Once again, God had opened a path for her to love. At the orphanage, Eleanor cooked, told stories, prayed softly, and held the children when they cried. They called her Grandma Eleanor with affection. Though her strength was limited, her heart was full of a new joy. In that unfamiliar place, Eleanor understood that loneliness had never been the end. When love is given, God always leads it to where warmth is needed most. The years passed quietly. Eleanor's strength slowly faded, but the flame within her never went out. Though her body grew weaker, her spirit remained steady, nourished by faith and a love that never ceased to give. When Eleanor passed away in peace, her presence did not disappear, but spread through all the hearts she had touched. On the day of her farewell, the room was not sunk in lonely sorrow. Children, neighbors, those she had helped, staff members, and even strangers came to say goodbye. Each face carried a small story, a memory of the kindness Eleanor had sown in their lives. Her passing became a living reminder that true love never disappears. Standing quietly among the crowd, Thomas finally understood what his mother had lived her whole life. Her seasons of loneliness had never been meaningless emptiness. They were guided, carefully prepared times for the love within her to grow and spread farther. What he once saw as loss was, in truth, a loving design. And that is the lesson the story leaves behind. When God allows people to enter seasons of loneliness, He is not punishing them, nor turning away. He is preparing. He quiets the noise so the heart can learn to listen. He allows certain relationships to leave, not to empty us, but to make our hearts wider. If today you feel lonely, remember that God may be shaping you into light for someone else. Love given in Him is never lost. It only changes its dwelling, continuing to live and to heal in ways we sometimes understand only when we look back.